The morning of March 7th, 1945. Cologne, Germany. Technical Sergeant Robert Early pressed his eye to the commander's periscope. The street ahead curved between three-story buildings with blown-out windows. Rubble choked the intersections. Smoke from burning vehicles drifted across the cobblestones. His M26 Pershing idled at the corner of Severinsstraße and Bayenstraße. 41 tons of American steel. The 90mm gun barrel extended 15 feet past the turret. Inside the turret, Corporal Clarence Smoyer sat in the gunner's position. His hands rested on the traverse wheel. The hydraulic motor hummed softly. Through the 4-power telescope, he watched the empty street. Nothing moved. No civilians. No Wehrmacht soldiers. No vehicles. The silence felt wrong. Early's voice crackled through the intercom. Movement. 11 o'clock. Smoyer traversed left. The turret rotated. Electric motors whining. The crosshairs swept past a burned-out truck, past a pile of masonry, then stopped. There, at the far end of the street, 700 yards away, an angular silhouette emerging from behind a building. Dark gray camouflage, long gun barrel, the unmistakable profile of a Panther tank. The German tank stopped. Its commander had spotted the Pershing. Both tanks sat motionless. Two predators, each waiting for the other to move. Smoyer's finger found the trigger guard. 8 pounds of pressure. That was all it took. 8 pounds between life and death. The Germans had taught American tank crews to fear their armor. For 3 years, Tiger and Panther tanks had dominated European battlefields. American Shermans with 75mm guns couldn't penetrate their frontal armor at combat ranges. Crews died in burning hulls while German crews collected easy victories. But this wasn't Sherman. The Pershing mounted a 90mm gun, the same weapon used on the M36 Jackson tank destroyer, the same weapon that had finally given American forces the ability to kill German heavy tanks at long range, the same weapon German tankers had learned to fear. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The question was simple. Would it work? The 90mm M3 gun fired a 24-pound armor-piercing shell at 2,800 feet per second. The tungsten-cored high-velocity armor-piercing round could punch through 246mm of steel at 1,000 yards. The Panther's frontal armor measured 80mm on the hull, 100mm on the turret. The mathematics said the shell should penetrate. Mathematics and combat were different things. Ole's voice came through again. Fire when ready. Smoyer centered the crosshairs on the Panther's turret. 700 yards. Well within effective range. He took a deep breath. Held it. The crosshairs steadied. He squeezed the trigger. The 90mm gun roared. The entire tank rocked backward on its suspension. Smoke filled the turret. The muzzle flash illuminated the street like lightning. The armor-piercing round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. Flight time, 0.8 seconds. The tungsten penetrator struck the Panther's turret front 6 inches below the gun mantlet. The steel glowed white-hot, then orange. Then it failed. The penetrator continued through the fighting compartment, severing hydraulic lines, igniting ammunition. The Panther exploded. Flames erupted from every hatch. The turret lifted 6 inches off its ring, balanced there, then crashed back down at a twisted angle. Black smoke rose into the gray German sky. Target destroyed, Smoyer reported. His voice was calm, professional, as if destroying a Panther tank at 700 yards was routine. For German tankers, this was not routine. This was impossible. This was everything they'd been promised would never happen. The German army had entered World War II with tactical and technological advantages that seemed insurmountable. Superior training, superior tactics, superior equipment. Their panzer divisions had conquered Poland in 4 weeks, France in 6 weeks. They'd pushed deep into the Soviet Union, destroyed thousands of Russian tanks. The psychological advantage was enormous. German tank crews believed they were invincible. Then the Americans arrived with Shermans, 75mm guns that bounced off German heavy armor, thin plating that German guns penetrated effortlessly. The Sherman became known as a Ronson lighter. One strike and it burned. American tank crews died by the thousands. 4 Sherman tanks lost for every German tank destroyed. The casualty rates were staggering. Crews refused to enter combat. Officers had to order men into tanks at gunpoint. The psychological trauma was profound. But the Americans had something the Germans didn't have: industrial capacity, research and development infrastructure, the ability to identify problems and solve them. By 1944, American engineers had developed the 90mm anti-tank gun, a weapon specifically designed to defeat German heavy armor. The M3 variant mounted on the M36 Jackson tank destroyer and later the M26 Pershing tank represented the culmination of 3 years of development. 3 years of battlefield defeats. 3 years of dead crews in burning Shermans. The 90mm gun was America's answer to German armor superiority. The question was whether it had arrived in time. The development of the 90mm gun began in 1942. American engineers studied captured German tanks. They analyzed armor thickness. They calculated penetration requirements. They designed a weapon that could defeat the Tiger Eye's 100mm frontal armor at combat ranges. The M3 gun fired several types of ammunition. M82 armor-piercing capped shells for standard penetration. M71 high-explosive shells for soft targets. And the T-30 E16 high-velocity armor-piercing round. The HVAP round used a tungsten carbide core surrounded by lightweight aluminum. The tungsten provided hardness. The aluminum provided velocity. At 1,000 yards, the HVAP round could penetrate 246 millimeters of steel angled at 30 degrees. That was enough to defeat any German tank. Tiger Eye Panther. Even the Tiger II's frontal armor was vulnerable at the right angle and range. But tungsten was scarce. Production was limited. Each M36 Jackson tank destroyer carried only 12 HVAP rounds initially. Each M26 Pershing carried the same. 12 chances to kill the heaviest German tanks. Crews had to make every shot count. The standard M82 armor-piercing round was more plentiful. It could penetrate 129 millimeters of armor at 500 yards, 122 millimeters at 1,000 yards. Sufficient for Panthers at medium range. Marginal for Tigers. Useless against Tiger IIs unless fired at the sides or rear. American tank destroyer doctrine evolved around these limitations. Engage at maximum effective range. Use terrain for concealment. Fire the first shot. Destroy the target before it could return fire. Then relocate. The tactic was called shoot and scoot. It worked when executed properly. When it failed, crews died. The M36 Jackson tank destroyer entered combat in Europe in September 1944. Initial deployments were limited. Production had been delayed by bureaucratic resistance. Army ground forces had insisted the Sherman was adequate. The 76mm gun was sufficient. There was no need for heavier weapons. Combat reports from Normandy proved otherwise. Sherman crews were being slaughtered by Panthers and Tigers. The request for better guns became demands. Production of the M36 accelerated. By October, significant numbers reached the front lines. German intelligence identified the new American tank destroyer immediately. Radio intercepts revealed their concern. Reports described the 90mm gun as sehr gefährlich, very dangerous. Tactical guidance was issued. Engage American heavy weapons at maximum range. Avoid close combat. Withdraw if outmatched. The hunters were becoming the hunted. The first confirmed long-range kills occurred in December 1944. An M36 from the 702nd Tank Destroyer Battalion engaged a Panther at 1,500 yards. The 90mm armor-piercing round penetrated the turret armor. The Panther burned. The crew bailed out. All survived. They told interrogators the same thing. They never expected an American tank to kill them at that range. Another engagement near Freiheldenhoven. December 1944. An M36 from the same battalion encountered a Tiger II. The King Tiger. Germany's heaviest production tank. 180 millimeters of frontal armor. The M36 fired from 1,000 yards. Side shot into the turret. The HVAP round penetrated. The Tiger II exploded. The crew died instantly. These are not anomalies. These were the new standard of American armored warfare. The 90mm gun had shifted the tactical balance. For the first time since Normandy, American armor could engage German heavy tanks on equal terms. The M26 Pershing arrived even later than Jackson. Only 20 tanks reached Europe in January 1945. They were distributed between the 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions. 1st Army. These were the only Pershings that would see combat in World War II. The crews who received them understood the significance. This was not another Sherman variant. This was a true heavy tank. 41 tons. Frontal armor 110 millimeters thick. The 90mm M3 gun, designed specifically to fight German Tigers and Panthers. Technical Sergeant Robert Early commanded one of these Pershings. His gunner was Corporal Clarence Smoyer. Both had served on Shermans since Normandy. They knew what it meant to fight German armor with inadequate weapons. They had watched friends die in burning tanks. They had fired round after round at Panthers only to watch the shells bounce off. They had retreated from Tigers because engaging them was suicide. The Pershing was different. Their first engagement came on February 26, 1945, near Elsdorf, Germany. A different crew, a Pershing nicknamed Fireball. The tank was overwatching a roadblock, protecting infantry clearing the town. A fire was burning nearby, rubble from destroyed buildings. The Pershing was silhouetted against the flames. Perfect target. A Tiger, hiding in the ruins, opened fire. 3 shots from 100 yards. The first shell penetrated the turret through the machine gun port, killed the gunner and loader instantly. The second shot hit the gun barrel, caused the chambered round to detonate. The explosion warped the barrel. The third shot glanced off the turret side. Fireball was knocked out, disabled, burning. The crew bailed out. 2 men dead, 3 wounded. The Tiger had 1. But this engagement revealed something important. The Tiger had needed 3 shots at 100 yards to disable the Pershing. The Sherman died to a single shot at any range. The Pershing's armor had saved 3 lives. That fact spread through American armored units immediately. The new tank could take hits and survive. Crews wanted them, demanded them. The psychological impact was enormous. The next day, February 27th, Early's crew encountered their first German tank, a Panzer IV, range 900 yards. The Panzer IV's frontal armor was only 80 millimeters thick. Standard armor piercing would be sufficient. Smoyer centered his crosshairs. Fired. The shell struck the turret ring, the weakest point on any tank. The 75mm gun barrel snapped upward. The turret jammed. Smoke poured from the engine compartment. The German crew bailed out. For men running, they made it to cover before anyone could engage them with machine gun fire. 1 shot, 1 kill. The mathematics worked. Later that same day, another engagement. A Panther at 1,500 yards. Too far for standard armor piercing. Early ordered HVAP loaded. Smoyer waited for the German tank to move into an optimal firing position. The Panther was maneuvering, trying to flank, exposing its side armor. Smoyer led the target, aimed 2 tank lengths ahead. Waited. The Panther entered his crosshairs. Fire. The HVAP round struck the side armor below the turret ring. Penetrated. Continued through the fighting compartment. Severed ammunition storage. The Panther exploded. Turret blown completely off the hull. Flames reached 30 feet high. No survivors. 2 kills in 1 day. The crew's confidence soared. Word spread through German radio networks immediately. American Schwerer Panzer. Heavy tank. 90mm Kanone. 90mm gun. Sehr gefährlich. Very dangerous. German tank commanders who heard these transmissions understood what it meant. The Americans finally had a weapon that could kill them at range. The psychological advantage had shifted. For 3 years, German crews had fought with the knowledge that their armor was superior. Their guns were more powerful. They could engage at ranges where return fire was ineffective. That knowledge bred confidence, aggression, tactical dominance. Now, that knowledge was obsolete. American tanks could kill them at 1,500 yards. Panthers, tigers, all vulnerable. German crews who had hunted Shermans with impunity now had to think twice. Maneuver carefully. Use terrain. Avoid exposure. The psychology of armored warfare had reversed. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen stood 400 meters across the Rhine River. 2 railroad tracks. Pedestrian walkways on each side. Stone towers at both ends. 3 stories each. Defensive positions. Machine gun ports. The bridge had been built in 1918 for military logistics, moving troops and supplies to the Western Front. Now, in March 1945, it was one of the last intact bridges across Germany's final natural barrier. Lieutenant Karl Timmermann led Company A, 27th Armored Infantry Battalion, down into Remagen at 1:50 p.m. on March 7th. Behind him, 2nd Lieutenant John Grimble commanded a platoon of 4 M26 Pershing tanks from the 14th Tank Battalion, the newest American heavy tanks. 90mm guns. The tanks overtook the infantry quickly. They raced through Remagen streets, scattered German resistance. 20mm flak guns firing from the hills. Ineffective. The Pershings returned fire. Their 90mm guns engaged targets across the river. A German train 800 yards away. High explosive rounds. The locomotive stopped. Smoke pouring from the engine. German defenders scattered. At 3:15 p.m., the lead Pershing reached the western end of the bridge. Major Hans Scheller, commanding the German defensive sector, gave the order to blow the demolition charges. The explosion created a 30-foot crater in the approach ramp. Debris fountained into the air. The Pershings stopped. They couldn't cross the gap, but the bridge itself still stood. Timmermann's infantry used the crater as cover. They exchanged fire with German defenders on the eastern bank. Machine guns, rifles, 20mm guns. The Germans were trying to detonate the main charges. The charges that would drop the entire bridge into the Rhine. The wiring failed. Faulty connections. Rushed installation. The main charges never fired. The bridge stood. Intact, damaged, but usable. The only bridge across the Rhine still in Allied hands. Brigadier General William Hogue, commanding Combat Command B, 9th Armored Division, received the report at 3:20 p.m. The bridge at Remagen was standing. German defenders were attempting to destroy it. If the Americans could capture it before demolition, they would have a bridgehead across Germany's last natural defense line. Hogue made his decision in seconds. Take the bridge. Hold it. Get across before the Germans blow it. The order went out immediately. Engineers moved forward to cut demolition wires. Infantry advanced across the bridge under fire. Machine gun rounds sparked off the steel superstructure. German defenders fired from the eastern towers. From positions on Erpelerlay, the steep hill overlooking the bridge, American troops took casualties. But they kept moving. By late afternoon, the bridge was secured. American forces held both ends. Engineers were already working to stabilize the structure. The explosions had weakened key supports. Heavy traffic would stress it further. But for now, it stood. The Pershings couldn't cross immediately. The bridge was rated for 35 tons maximum. The Pershing weighed 41 tons. Engineers calculated load capacity, stress points, structural integrity. The verdict was clear. The bridge might not support the heavy tanks. On March 12th, 5 days after capture, the first Pershing crossed. Not over the bridge. Transported on a pontoon ferry. Engineers had built temporary crossings upstream and downstream. The strategic situation had changed completely. American forces now had multiple routes across the Rhine. 7 divisions crossed in the first week. Tanks, artillery, trucks, supplies. The bridge had expanded. 6 divisions, then 8. The Germans counterattacked repeatedly. Luftwaffe bombers targeted the bridge. Stukas, Messerschmitts. What remained of German air power focused on destroying the crossing. American anti-aircraft defenses were overwhelming. The largest concentration of anti-aircraft weapons in the European theater. Hundreds of guns, radar-directed fire. The German bombers took catastrophic losses. Hitler ordered special operations. Otto Skorzeny, the man who had rescued Mussolini. He sent frogmen, 7 SS naval demolition specialists. They entered the water 11 miles upstream. March 17th. The water was freezing. 2 died of hypothermia. American defenders spotted the rest. M3 Lee tanks mounting canal defense lights. 13 million candle-power searchlights. The first combat use of the new technology. The lights illuminated the river. Caught the swimmers. Machine gun fire. 2 killed. 3 captured. The sabotage attempt failed. That same day, March 17th, the Ludendorff Bridge collapsed. 10 days after capture. Structural damage from the German demolition attempts. Stress from heavy traffic. 25 American soldiers died. 63 injured. But by then, it didn't matter. Engineers had completed 3 additional bridges. Pontoon, Treadway, Bailey. The Rhine had been crossed. The bridgehead was secure. The German response revealed their desperation. Field Marshal Walter Model called the Remagen capture a catastrophe. General Albert Kesselring described it as the crime of Remagen. It broke the front along the Rhine. Hermann Göring said it made a long defense impossible. Major General Karl Wagener, Model's chief of staff, stated that Remagen should have been considered a basis for termination of the war. The psychological impact was devastating. German forces west of the Rhine were trapped. Cut off. 75,000 troops. Their only escape route had been the Ludendorff Bridge. Now it was in American hands. The Wehrmacht could not mass forces for counterattack. American armor poured through the gap. The industrial heartland of Germany lay open. The Ruhr Valley. Coal. Steel. Manufacturing. The war was ending. 4 German tank crews. Remagen represented the collapse of their final defensive line. They had retreated across Germany for months, fighting delaying actions, trying to slow the American advance. They had believed the Rhine would provide time, a natural barrier, a place to regroup, reform defensive positions. The Americans would have to assault across the river. Amphibious operations. Vulnerable. Costly. German armor could counterattack, destroy the beachheads, drive the Americans back. That was the plan. Remagen destroyed it. American forces crossed unopposed, established a massive bridgehead. German armor was scattered, disorganized, low on fuel, short of ammunition, unable to mount effective counterattacks. The 90mm guns were everywhere. The M36 Jackson tank destroyers formed defensive screens, positioned on high ground, overlooking approaches. German tanks attempting to reach the bridgehead encountered American fire at 1,500 yards. Panthers destroyed before they could close range. Tigers engaged from the flanks. HVAP rounds penetrating side armor. The German counterattacks failed repeatedly, not from lack of courage. German tank crews fought hard. They maneuvered skillfully. They used terrain effectively. But they couldn't overcome the firepower disparity. American 90mm guns could kill them at ranges where they couldn't effectively return fire. The tactical mathematics had shifted permanently. By late March, German armored forces were effectively defeated in the West. Not destroyed, but rendered combat ineffective. Units were scattered across hundreds of kilometers. Communication broke down. Supply lines collapsed. Fuel shortages became critical. Ammunition stocks depleted. Crews abandoned damaged tanks that could have been repaired. There was no time, no parts, no mechanics, no recovery vehicles. The industrial infrastructure that had supported German armor for 5 years was gone. Allied bombing had destroyed the factories, the rail networks, the supply depots. German tanks were running out of everything. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts, hope. The psychological collapse was visible in prisoner interrogations. German tankers captured in April 1945 told consistent stories. They had believed their armor was superior. Their training was better. Their tactics were proven. Then American 90mm guns appeared. Panthers died at 1,500 yards. Tigers at 1,000. The invincibility was gone, replaced by fear. German crews began avoiding combat when possible, withdrawing before engagement, abandoning tanks with minor damage. The will to fight was eroding, not from cowardice, from pragmatism. Why die in a burning Panther when the war was clearly lost? American intelligence reports documented the shift. Radio intercept from March and April showed declining morale. Unit commanders reported reluctance to engage. Withdrawal requests increased. Desertion rates climbed. The German army was disintegrating. Not just armored forces, the entire Wehrmacht. But tanks were particularly visible. A destroyed Panther on a roadside was a symbol. German technological superiority had been a cornerstone of Nazi propaganda. The Tiger tank, the Panther, superior to anything the Allies fielded. That narrative had sustained German forces through 3 years of war. Retreats on the Eastern Front, losses in Italy, defeat in France. The propaganda said German weapons were better. If they lost, it was because they were outnumbered, not outfought. The 90mm gun destroyed that narrative. American weapons could now match German technology. Industrial capacity was overwhelming German production. The mathematical reality was inescapable. Germany was losing. Clarence Smoyer's crew continued fighting through March and into April. Their Pershing Eagle 7 engaged German armor repeatedly. Panthers near Paderborn. A Jagdpanzer IV outside Marburg. Panzer IVs retreating toward the Weser River. Every engagement followed the same pattern. Detect the enemy at long range. Maneuver to optimal firing position. Engage with the first shot. Destroy the target before it could effectively return fire. The 90mm gun never failed to penetrate when it hit. The tungsten cord HVAP rounds punched through any armor they struck. The standard armor-piercing rounds defeated Panthers and Panzer IVs consistently. Even Tigers were vulnerable if engaged from favorable angles. The German crews they encountered were skilled, experienced. They knew their vehicles. They understood tactics. They fought hard, but skill couldn't overcome physics. The 90mm M3 gun fired a heavier projectile at higher velocity than the German 75mm or 88mm guns. The penetration values were superior. The accuracy was comparable. The American tanks had one additional advantage: reliability. Pershings broke down less frequently than German heavy tanks. Tiger IIs had chronic transmission problems. Panthers suffered from engine fires, final drive failures, suspension issues. German crews spent as much time maintaining their tanks as fighting them. American crews fought. The Ford GAF engine was proven, reliable, maintainable. The transmission had teething problems initially, but those were resolved. By April 1945, Pershings were mechanically sound. The strategic impact extended beyond tactical engagements. German tank production had collapsed. Allied bombing had destroyed the Maybach engine plant in April 1944. Production stopped for 5 months. The MAN factory at Nuremberg, the Daimler-Benz plant, all bombed repeatedly. Panther production peaked at 380 tanks in July 1944. By March 1945, it had ceased entirely. Tiger II production never exceeded significant numbers. Perhaps 490 total. Not enough to matter. The industrial base was gone. Meanwhile, American factories continued mass production. M36 Jacksons, M26 Pershings, thousands of units. The disparity was overwhelming. The final German armored operations in the West occurred in April 1945. Scattered engagements, company-sized actions, individual tanks fighting from ambush positions. There were no more massed panzer divisions, no coordinated offensives, just desperate men trying to slow the inevitable. American forces encountered German armor less frequently. When they did, the engagements were brief. German tanks withdrew quickly, or died quickly. The 90mm guns had established dominance. German crews knew it. American crews knew it. The outcome of any engagement was predictable. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe ended. American armored forces stopped advancing. Engines idled. Guns fell silent. Clarence Smoyer climbed out of Eagle 7 for the last time as a combat gunner. 23 confirmed kills. 0 losses to his crew. The Pershing had protected them. The 90mm gun had given them the firepower to win. They had survived. Thousands of Sherman crews had not. The difference was timing. 3 years of inadequate weapons. Then 6 months of parity. It was enough. The German tankers who survived told their stories to interrogators, to historians, to anyone who would listen. They described the shock of encountering American 90mm guns. The first kills at 1,500 yards. The realization that their armor was no longer superior. The psychological collapse that followed. Some are bitter. They had believed the propaganda. Superior German engineering. Wunderwaffen. Wonder weapons that would turn the tide. The wonder weapons arrived too late. Too few. While American factories mass-produced proven designs. The Tiger II was superior to the Pershing in some specifications. Thicker armor. More powerful gun. But there were fewer than 500 Tiger IIs. Thousands of Pershings would be built. Quality meant nothing without quantity. Others were philosophical. The war was lost long before Remagen. Before the 90mm guns appeared. Germany was fighting the combined industrial might of America, Britain, and the Soviet Union. The mathematics were impossible. Superior tactics couldn't overcome 10-to-1 numerical disadvantages. Better trained crews couldn't compensate for fuel shortages. Advanced technology couldn't replace destroyed factories. The 90mm gun was simply the visible symbol of American industrial capacity. The ability to identify a problem, design a solution, mass-produce it, deploy it across an entire theater. That was America's true advantage. Not the gun itself, the system that created it. The M36 Jackson tank destroyers remained in service through the Korean War. The 90mm gun proved effective against Soviet T-34 tanks. North Korean armor was destroyed consistently. The same weapon that killed Tigers and Panthers in Europe killed Russian-designed tanks in Asia. The M26 Pershing also served in Korea, fighting in mountainous terrain, supporting infantry operations. The 90mm gun remained lethal. By the 1950s, newer tanks entered service. The M46 Patton, the M47, the M48, all mounted improved versions of the 90mm gun, or larger calibers. The technology advanced, but the fundamental principle remained. Kinetic energy penetration, tungsten or depleted uranium cores, high velocity, heavy projectiles. The physics that made the M3 gun effective in 1945 remained valid decades later. The myth of German armor superiority died in the fields of Western Germany. March through May 1945. Not because German tanks became inferior. They remained well-designed, well-built, powerful. But American weapons finally achieved parity. The 90mm gun could penetrate German armor at combat ranges. That single fact changed everything. German crews could no longer rely on armor protection. They could no longer engage with impunity. They faced opponents who could kill them. The psychological advantage evaporated. Fear replaced confidence. Caution replaced aggression. The hunters became the hunted. For American tankers, the arrival of 90mm guns represented validation. 3 years of fighting with inadequate weapons. 3 years of watching friends die because their shells bounced off German armor. 3 years of knowing the enemy had better tanks. That burden was lifted. Not completely. The Sherman remained the primary American tank through war's end. 75mm guns still struggled against heavy German armor. But the Pershings and Jacksons provided hope. Proof that American industry could produce weapons equal to German technology. That knowledge sustained crews, improved morale, reduced combat stress. Men fought harder when they believed they had effective weapons. The technical specifications told the story in numbers. The Tiger Eye's frontal armor measured 100 millimeters. The 90mm HVAP round could penetrate 246 millimeters at 1,000 yards. The Panther's frontal armor measured 80 millimeters hull, 100 millimeters turret. The 90 millimeters standard armor-piercing round could penetrate 129 millimeters at 500 yards. The mathematics were unambiguous. American guns could kill German tanks. The reverse was also true. German guns could kill American tanks. But the Americans had numbers, industrial capacity, the ability to replace losses. Germany did not. Every destroyed Panther was irreplaceable. Every killed Tiger represented months of production time that could never be recovered. The attrition rate favored America. Time favored America. Industrial capacity favored America. The 90 millimeter gun simply accelerated the inevitable. The German tank commanders understood this. Field Marshal Model committed suicide on April 21, 1945. He refused to surrender, refused to outlive Germany's military honor. His chief of staff, Karl Wagner, survived. He told interrogators that Remagen ended the war. The Rhine crossing broke German defensive plans. The 90 millimeter guns destroyed German armored reserves. The combination was catastrophic. Other German officers agreed. The capture of an intact Rhine bridge was lucky for the Americans. The appearance of effective anti-tank weapons was inevitable. American industry would have solved the firepower problem eventually. Remagen simply compressed the timeline. Instead of weeks, the Americans had immediate access to Germany's interior. Instead of gradual improvement, the 90 millimeter guns appeared in significant numbers. The combination overwhelmed German defenses. The soldiers who fought these battles rarely discussed them afterward. Clarence Smoyer returned to civilian life. He worked, raised a family, lived quietly. When asked about his service, he was modest. He had done his duty, survived when many did not. The Pershing had protected him. The 90 millimeter gun had given him the tools to fight effectively. He was grateful for both. Other American tankers told similar stories. The new weapons had arrived when needed. Not soon enough to save everyone, but soon enough to matter. The men who died in Shermans in 1944 didn't benefit from the 90 millimeter guns. That knowledge haunted survivors. Why them and not us? Survivors' guilt was universal. Random chance determined who lived and who died. Being assigned to a Pershing instead of Sherman. Fighting in April 1945 instead of June 1944. Small decisions. Arbitrary assignments. Life or death. The German tankers who survived carried different burdens. They had fought for a regime that committed atrocities. Genocide. War crimes. Aggressive war. Their service enabled those crimes. Regardless of personal beliefs. Regardless of whether they knew the full extent of Nazi policies. They served. They fought. Some justified their actions. They were soldiers, following orders, defending their homeland. Others struggled with guilt, the weight of what they had been part of. These men rarely spoke publicly about their experiences. The shame was too great, but in private, to family, to trusted confidants, they told their stories. The shock of American firepower, the collapse of German defensive plans, the final desperate months, the relief when it ended. The 90 millimeter gun represented a turning point. Not the only turning point, not even the most important. Allied victory was determined by industrial capacity, strategic bombing, the two-front war, Soviet advances in the East, American production in the West. The 90 millimeter gun was one component of a much larger system. But for the men who fought in tanks, it mattered enormously. It was the difference between fighting with hope or fighting without it. Between facing opponents you could kill or opponents who were invulnerable. That psychological dimension was critical. Wars are fought by human beings. Their morale, their confidence, their will to continue. The 90 millimeter gun sustained American morale at a critical time. It broke German morale when they could least afford it. In that sense, it was decisive. The technical achievement deserves recognition. American engineers identified a specific problem. German heavy tanks. They designed a specific solution. A 3.5-inch gun capable of defeating 100 millimeters of armor at combat ranges. They tested it, refined it, mass-produced it, deployed it, supported it. The entire process from concept to combat deployment took less than 3 years. That timeline was remarkable. Modern weapon systems take decades to develop. The 90mm gun went from drawing board to battlefield in 36 months. The urgency of war drove innovation. The industrial capacity of America made it possible. The human cost of delayed deployment was high. If the 90mm gun had been available in Normandy, June 1944, thousands of American tankers would have survived. The Sherman would still have been the primary tank. Logistics demanded it. But the presence of 90mm guns in significant numbers would have changed tactical situations. German Tigers and Panthers would have faced effective opposition earlier. The psychological advantage would have shifted sooner. The casualty rates would have been lower. This counterfactual haunted the men who made procurement decisions, the officers who delayed development, the bureaucrats who insisted the Sherman was adequate. They were wrong. Men died because of their errors. That knowledge was a burden they carried the rest of their lives. But historical judgment must be tempered with context. The decision-makers in 1942 and 1943 operated with imperfect information. They didn't know how effective German heavy tanks would be. They didn't know how many would be produced. They were balancing multiple priorities: logistics, production capacity, testing time, the pressure to deploy any effective weapon quickly versus the need to deploy the right weapon. These were genuine dilemmas, easy to judge in retrospect, difficult to navigate in real time. The 90mm gun arrived when it could be produced in quantity, when a logistics system could support it, when crews could be trained to use it effectively. Earlier deployment would have meant fewer guns, less support, uncertain effectiveness. The timing was imperfect, but not arbitrary. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.